Okay, I think we're recording here. Let's take a look. There's a 1983 Marshall JCM 800 4010 combo. We're going to tear this thing down and put some new tubes in and bias it. So what you got to do first, you got to unscrew those. Little Velcro for my reverb. And then what you should do, like I've done, you pull the power tubes. I'm going to probably leave those preamp tubes in with the preamp shields to protect it. Then you're just going to pull the amp chassis out of the cabinet, and then we'll get it up on the bench. So I think you can imagine I'm going to unscrew the screws, take the screws out, pull the chassis out, and then we're going to put it on this amp cradle here, and we'll end up running into the speakers of that 4104 1983 JCM 800 and get it going. So I will be back. Okay, we got the amplifier out of the cabinet. It's got these metal kind of pieces just to keep it in there solid. And let's just take a look back here. So the chassis rests on these pieces a little bit, but that last screw, I hold it by the transformer. You unplug the speaker first. Nice old G1280 Celestion, Rolla Celestion, which they're getting kind of rare, but this thing sounds great. So we got the amp on the cradle now, and if you see that black, it's actually a bias trim pot, kind of upright with the white center. We're going to be working with that. But before we do, here, let's go around the other side. And so what I'm going to do is I've got to select some tubes here, some nice USA Tungsol 6550s. I need to plug it into a speaker cabinet, and that's going to be the speakers from this JCM 800. And we'll walk through the bias process. So let me select some tubes, and we're going to be using the SRS Dual Bias Tool today, and standard multimeter. I've got an old Craftsman digital that's going to work fine. And you never really want to touch anything in here barehanded unless you discharge the caps. And so you basically keep one hand behind your back at all times. And I'm going to be using a ceramic tip screwdriver. So we're going to get all that going. And once we're back, we will look at all the variables going on in here. Okay, we are set up. I haven't powered on yet, but let's just take a look at all the stuff we got here. There is the multimeter hooked up to the SRS Dual Bias tube. Here is my ceramic tip screwdriver. Basically, what we need to do, before I forget, everything goes to 0. Okay, you don't plug anything in. Everything is on 0. You're basically idling it. Here's our quick look there. I've got the speaker connected to this awesome 4104 JCM 800. We selected some nice old school Tungsol 6550s, and you can see there's the SRS bias tool sockets. You plug the tubes into that, and that goes into the multimeter. And let's take a look at this, how we've got it set up. Okay, so it's set up to volts DC, 200 millivolts, which it's going to be reading, basically coming back to us in milliamps. But so let me fire this thing up and get set up, and we will come right back. Okay, we are powered up and warming up. I'm going to bump the bias down a hair, and then since I got the camera on a tripod here. So here's the thing. You want to use one of these. This is a ceramic tipped screwdriver. It's non-conductive in any way, shape, or form. I got one hand behind my back. I'm going to turn this down, and you bump this a tiny bit. So I'm reading 39.5 on the hotter tube. Here, let me just see. And 38.4. So these are pretty closely matched. And the great thing about this bias tool, you don't have to pull your amp out of the chassis of a cabinet or whatever to match tubes. You could just put in a couple of tubes, or say you got a whole bunch, and match them up, as closely as you can. These, like I said, let me just see again. So I got 38.6. It's still warming up. You got to let these things warm up a bit. And I got 39.940. And the thing to realize is I'm in the wall voltage right now. I didn't check today. It normally goes between 123 to 125 volts, but I never run it into the wall. It's going into an ohmite variable transformer set to 115 volts. So it's going to take 2 or 3 milliamps off, but I'm going to turn this down. So I got one hand behind my back. You don't touch anything. I'm just going to barely turn this. Okay, so that little turn, I'm at 39.5, and I'll show you guys the multimeter in a second. 38.3 and 39.5. And the idea is I had this on standby for about 15 minutes, and then when you hit the power, you got to let the tubes get hot. And these are 6550s. So let me get this thing out of the bracket here. Whoa, sorry about that. Okay, so that's the hot tube. Here's the SRS Dual Bias. So that little toggle, you get to select between the tubes. So that's my hot tube, and 38.7. And like I said, it's bouncing around. That's really normal. And my target is 40 on the hot tube. And I'm going to let it keep getting hot. It's looking like it's pretty stable there, though, because that would be kind of on the hot side of a bias for this amp and those tubes if I was going into the wall, which I never do. I'm always setting it up to 115. So it's stable. So we're going to, actually, let's just walk around here. So, whoops. So I got the, there they are. And you can see the SRS bias sockets there. And I'm just going to let it get a little warmer, but I think we're close to good. This, I got to say, I've been playing a long time, and I've had this JCM 800 and that one a super long time. That amp right there has done so many gigs all over the country. So many LA gigs. Thing sounds awesome. This one sounds awesome too. I always wondered why they sounded a little bit different, and it's pretty much because they were always using the same tubes, Tungsol 6550s, Telefunken, ECC 83 12AX7s, but they always sounded different. And you'd be amazed at how great you can make an amp sound with the right bias. See, it's still 39.9, 38.8. I'm probably going to leave it there, but I'm going to leave it on a little longer. And the bouncing around on the current is totally normal, but we will come back and then finalize this deal. Okay, we are back, and it's probably, let me see here, it's probably been about 10 minutes since the last little reading. I got 41.5 and 41.7, so you can see 41.8 that you really got to give this some time and let the tubes get hot. We're going to take it down a notch, back down to 40, but the tubes, when I hit the bias selector, 41.5, 41.9, so they actually got closer, and you just got to let the tubes heat up. 6550s are big tubes. So let me see if I can put this on the tripod without making too much of a mess of the... Okay, there we go. So let's get the bias down. I'm going to use my ceramic tool here, and I got one hand behind my back. I'm going to just barely move that a hair. So that little bump is 40.9 and 40.4. I'm going to give it another little bump. I want this at 40 max in the wall, because then when it's going at 115 volts, it's going to be, I think, around 38, which is awesome for the bloom. Okay, hold on. Okay, that is 40.1 and 39.7, and it bounces around a lot, and you just, so after that little bump, I'm gonna let it just idle for another 5 minutes and expect it to bounce around 40.1, 40.2. But so far what I've learned, and I'm really new at all this, expect it to bounce around a couple of numbers. Okay, what do we got here? 40.1, 39.6, 39.4, 39.5, 0.6, 0.7, and it just jumps back and forth. And I just bumped the bias just a tiny bit. And I'm no electrician here. I'm just trying to, actually, to be honest with you, there's nobody in my town here that biases tube amps. And so I got on ChatGPT, and it walked me through on how to do it. And I've done my 4104 JCM 800. I did my Germino JTM 45 clone. Both of them sound amazing now. And it's not hard. Go get yourself a digital multimeter. Get yourself an SRS Dual Bias Tool. And I'm not affiliated with the company. It just makes it easy. I mean, there's another way you can do this. You have to, you basically would be taking readings with a multimeter and probing around in here, where you can accidentally touch the wrong thing and probably give yourself a nice new hairdo that you weren't really looking for. But I'm not really, I'm just trying to get this job done safely. And the SRS Bias Tool, what did I pay for this thing? I think it was $72 with shipping. And it is December 2025, so who knows with inflation where things are going. So right now on the meter, we got 40.7 and 39.8. So I'm probably going to bust it down another notch, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to let it. It looks like it wants to climb up to 41. So if you're doing this, I'd say give yourself an hour and get it right and make sure it's right. And then once you got it right, maybe go a week later, and you don't have to tear the amp down. You can just, while it's in the chassis, pull the tubes, put in the bias tool sockets, and then run it the same way and just check your reading and make sure it hasn't drifted. My understanding is bias normally will drift a little bit, but normally to the lower side. But the whole point of getting a good bias on your amp is a couple of reasons. One is if it's set too high, you're going to blow through tubes. And I don't know if you're aware of what USA vintage Tungsol 6550s cost, but they're not cheap. I mean, I actually used to be a NOS tube dealer, so I can identify them just by looking at them. But if you were going to pay top dollar for a nice pair of those, oh man, I'd say $300 to $400 is pretty standard. So if your bias is set too high, you're going to kill your tubes. And if you set it a little lower, you'll extend the life of the tubes. But then there's that sweet spot, which I think a lot of people will call the bloom zone. And that's kind of what I'm after. Okay, so we got 41.1 and 39. Okay, so I'm going to leave it on the hot tube. So I got basically one milliamp of difference. I'm going to get the 41 back down to 40. So here we go again. Okay, I'm just going to see. I don't even think you can see how much I turned it. It was so minuscule. And now it's at 40.6. I'm going to go a little more. So it's this middle white thing that turns. So, okay, there we are at 40 now. So the hot tube is 40 and 39 on the cooler tube. Another thing to realize, this is a 50 watt Marshall, so there's two power tubes. My understanding is one socket typically will read hotter than the other. And say, you know, and so what I really should do with magic marker or marker as soon as I'm done with this is mark the tubes 1 and 2. Let's just say I had okay, let's just check the reading here. It's 40, right on 40.1, 40, right on the dot, 39. I'll bet you if I switch those tubes around, they might be 2 milliamps apart. So it's worth experimenting. If you're 1 or 2 milliamps apart, that's better than factory matching, to be honest. And for what it's worth, I have a whole collection of probably 20 Tungsol 6550s. And what I do is I use a Sylvania 220 tester, and it's not like a maxi matcher. It's not going to match at plate voltage, but it's going to give you a pretty good ballpark of tubes that are close together. Then when you put them in the amp, let's say I was 3 or 4 milliamps apart, switching the tubes, the power tubes in the different sockets, you might find just switching those two tubes gets you closer. All right, we got 40.2, 39. I'm actually going to put it on the hot tube and I'm going to bump it down. Let's see if I can get it to like 39. It's super touchy. I learned this on my other amp doing this. You're trying to chase an exact number. Good luck. So again, my hand is behind my back. I'm only going to touch this one thing right there. Okay, there, I probably did it too much. I got 39.3 and 37.8. So let's just let it sit here. It might creep back up. You're going to find it might take, 20 minutes or so until the thing really just bounces between 1 or 2 numbers. And I might be there now, but I think I just got it too low. So I got 39 and 37. Or, wait, 39, 37.8. And what I'm looking for is my hot tube right now is 39. I want that at 40 because I'm not going to run this in the wall. So let's chase that bias. So I got 39.1. I'm going to go up a hair if I can. Okay, see, I just went too much now. It's so touchy, man. Okay, 0.6. I'm going to go try to get it just a hair lower. Just a little lower. Okay, that, I got 40.3, 40.2, 40.1, 40. In my colder tube, it's 38.678. Hot tube is 40.123, 40.3, 40. And I like, again, I said, I'm no expert. I think whenever you hit the bias trim pot, it's such a small movement of the trim pot. Then I think what happens is it has to settle out. Every time you bump the bias trim pot, it needs to settle out. So now I got 40.2, 38.67. And when I get this running at 115 volts, my hot tube will be 38, and my colder tube would be 37, which is right in the bloom zone. The bloom zone is like very pick responsive, very touch responsive. This exact amp on my channel, I'm doing a jam in a club in Ronan, Montana, the Red Poppy. That's this amp. This thing sounds amazing when it's set up. And what happened was, about 6 months ago, I had a tube failure, and I never had this happen before. The tube, right at the top of the tube, cracked, and I replaced it, and then I was using my 4104 for a while. When I got this bias tool, I just did a check on it, and my bias was like 50 on the hot side, and that's why my tube failed. And so I destroyed a really nice, I don't know, $150 tube because I made assumptions. So we got 40.5, 38.9, 40.3. Man, it's tricky. Okay, we're going to come back because I think I'm going to have to wait on this. Okay, so it's only a couple of minutes after the last check. 40.4. 38.789. I mean, it's close to where I want it. I'm probably going to bump it down again, though. But, you know, I set up that amp with this exact bias setting, and there's my ohmite, or two. I have two ohmite variable transformers. Those things are awesome. The Van Halen Variac. But, yeah, you can see how this thing just bounces around. 40.4, 6, 7. See, I thought I saw it go up to 8. I'm probably going to bump this down again. But we're close. So let's see if I can get this in the tripod without creating too much of a mess of the video. Okay, that's not bad. So okay, so it's 40.8. Let's get it down just a little lower. Okay. Okay, it's not, so I'm trying to do this lightly. Okay, there we go. 39.8, 39.6. 38. I'm going to leave that setting for a little bit. Let's just say, though, you wanted to bias it cooler. Say you want your Marshall to be a cleaner tone. That's the easiest way, is set the bias colder. You end up fighting the amp a little more, if you know what I mean. It's not as touch sensitive. Your tubes will last so long. So what do we got on the hot tube? Okay, we got 39.67. I'm probably going to leave it here, I'm thinking. 37.8. Let's see what this does for a little bit. But as you can see in the amp, there's really not a lot going on. You do have to be careful though. There's voltage in here that my understanding is if you had both of your hands in there and you touched one of the caps and the full 450 volts went across your two hands, which is going to cross your heart, I mean, you're probably a goner at that point. I mean, just think of this. They use electricity to zap people back to life, and just like they can zap you back into life, this could zap you out of life. So you got to be careful. But you know, just think about when you drive a car, how dangerous that is, and people don't even think of that. So I got 39.6, 39.7, 37.7 on the cool side, the other tube, 39.6, 39.5, 39.6, 39.7. It seems to be staying right there. Let's just wait a little longer, but I'm thinking we're going to be good on this. So that's my little video on, you know, how you can bias your own tube amp. It's really not hard. And I would say if you can be careful, you got to get, you know what, let me see what the name of this tool is here, what the company, I don't even know what that thing says. Let's see if we can get the camera to focus on this. I don't think so. Here, let me see if I can read that. Y-U-E-R-A-N. URAN. They sell these ceramic tipped plastic non-conductive screwdrivers in sets. They're like $10, and they're designed for working on electrical stuff like this. Get yourself a set of these. Get yourself the SRS Dual Bias Tool. Go into ChatGPT and say, hey, I've got an SRS Dual Bias Tool and I got this kind of a non-conductive screwdriver and I want to learn how to bias my tube amp. And that's what I did. And I don't, you know, like I said, I couldn't find anybody around here. I would have had to have gone 3 or 4 hours away to find somebody. But the bottom line is it's easy to do, and it's going to save you a ton of money. I think it's probably, I don't know where, you know, around the country. I'm going to guess between 50 and $100, no matter where you are in the country, somewhere in there. But more importantly, once you learn how to dial in the tone you want, man, it's priceless. So that's my video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.